Chapter 9. I went to my room and decided that I needed a hot bath. While I was in the bathroom, lying in the water, I was surprised to hear someone come into the bedroom. "It's me," called Ruth. "I've brought you some dry clothes. Dinner will be ready in an hour." "Okay," I called back. "Thank you." After she left the room, I got out of the bath. She had put a shirt and a pair of jeans on the bed. The shirt had Lang's initials, APBL, on the pocket. My wet clothes had gone. I looked under the bed. The envelope was still there. I put on the dry clothes, sat down at the desk and looked through Mkara's manuscript. I read to page 50 before there was any mention of Ruth. I first met Ruth Capel at the time of the London elections. She was very politically active and was much cleverer than me. I immediately liked her, and after several evenings knocking on doors and giving out election leaflets, I persuaded her to come to a pub for a drink. A year after the elections, I asked her to marry me and our wedding was in June, 1979. I looked through the rest of the chapters and put a line under the places where she was mentioned. There were very few. Perhaps she had guessed that I'd want to put in more about her, and that was the reason she wanted me to write the new memoirs. I checked my watch and saw that it was already time for dinner. I put the manuscript away and went upstairs. Ruth was reading a magazine and there was a bottle of white wine on the low table in front of her. I sat down on the sofa and she poured me a glass of wine. "We'll eat in 20 minutes, she said, switching on the television. "First we must watch the news." A picture of Lang in Washington, D.C. with the U.S. Secretary of State appeared on the TV screen. Amelia Bligh was standing behind the two men. The Secretary of State began to speak. "Adam Lang has worked with us in the War on Terror and I'm proud to stand beside him this afternoon," he said, holding out his hand. "Adam, it's good to see you. Don't grin, Adam," Ruth said to the television. "Thank you," said Lang, grinning and shaking the hand. "It's good to see you." Ruth swore and was about to switch off the TV when Richard Reichardt's face appeared on the screen. He was nearly 60, a little older than Lang, and had gray hair, but was quite good looking. "I watched the announcement in The Hague today," he said, with great shock and sadness. Adam Lang was, and still is, an old friend. "Liar!" Ruth shouted at the television. "But this is about justice," he finished. Ruth turned off the television as her mobile phone started to ring. She looked at it. "It's Adam, calling to ask me what I think." She turned off the phone. "Let him wait. Does he always ask your advice?" I said. "Always," she said. He used to listen to it, but not now. You were right, I said. He shouldn't have gone to Washington. We should never have come here, she said. We had dinner at the long table by the window, silently at first. Then Ruth said, "How are you getting on with the book?" "Not very well, to be honest," I said. "I find it difficult to understand Adam." At the age of 18 he goes to Cambridge with no interest in politics at all. He spends all his time acting and drinking and meeting girls. Then, suddenly, by the time he's 22 or 23, he's a member of a political party. "Why? Didn't you ask him?" she said. "He told me that he joined because of you," I said. "He said that he followed you into politics because of love." I could understand that, if it were true. "Isn't it true, then?" she asked. "You know it isn't," I said. "He was a member of the party for at least a year before he met you." "Was he?" she said. "But I do remember knocking on his door." After that he did start coming to meetings. Maybe he joined in 1975, wasn't very interested in it, then he met you and became more interested. "But what made him join in 1975? Is all this important?" she asked. "Yes, it is," I said. "Because it means he isn't quite who we think he is." "I'm not sure he's quite who he thinks he is, and that's really difficult when I've got to write his memoirs." "How do you know that he joined in 1975? she asked. There seemed to be no reason not to tell her. Mkara found his original membership card in some newspaper reports about the 1977 elections. They were with all the other papers in Cambridge. We ate in silence for some minutes. Then she said, in 1975 his mother and father were both dead and he'd left university. Many of his acting friends were getting work, but he wasn't. He got very depressed. I think he went into politics because he couldn't succeed as an actor. Quite a lot of people become politicians because they can't succeed in other jobs. Did you ever want to be a politician? I asked. Of course, she said. I've always understood more about politics than Adam has. But I soon realized that he was the great speaker, not me, and that people liked him. Now, show me this research of Michael's. I'm interested. I went down to my room and got Mkara's envelope. When I returned, Ruth had moved back to the sofa. I opened the envelope and took out the photographs, Lane's membership card and the reports about the London elections. She picked up the membership card. Well, that's definitely his signature, she said. She looked through the photographs slowly, smiling. Then she held out the picture with the telephone number on the back. "What's this telephone number?" she asked. I felt my face getting hot. I should have told her about it earlier. Now I looked guilty. "It's Richard Reichardt's," I said quietly. "I rang it." She looked shocked. "You've been talking to Richard Reichart?" "I haven't," I said. "Mkar must have written the number down. When did you discover this?" she asked. "Earlier today," I said. "And then you went to Lambert's Cove," she said quietly. "Why did you do that?" "I'm not sure." I told her about the old man I'd met near the cove and also about Annabeth Wurmbrand. "She's in a coma," I said, "so she can't tell the police anything." "That's all I know." She was silent for a moment and then she said, "I'm going for a walk. This is serious and I need to think." "I'll come with you," I said. "No," she said. "I need to be on my own." Very early the next morning, I heard someone knocking on my bedroom door. "Are you awake?" said Ruth, quietly. "I am now," I said. "Wait a minute." I put on the dressing gown that was hanging up in the bathroom. Then I opened the bedroom door. "What time is it?" I asked, when she came in. "I don't know, I couldn't sleep." "I've just spoken to Adam." She was also wearing a dressing gown and she was shaking. "I haven't told anyone this, not even the police." "What?" I asked. "The day before Michael died, he and Adam had a terrible argument," she said. "What was it about?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. When I asked Adam about it, he refused to tell me. But a few minutes ago, when I told him that Michael had talked to Reichart before he died, he didn't even pretend to be surprised. "He knew." "He said that?" I asked. "He didn't need to," she said. "I knew by the sound of his voice." "He said that he couldn't talk about it on the telephone, but we should talk when he gets back." Dear God, what has he done? We were silent for a few moments while we both thought about the situation. "What are you going to do about all this?" she asked. "About Adam? Nothing," I said. "If he wants to tell the truth about things that have happened, then I'm here to help. If he doesn't, that's okay, too. But if something illegal has happened—" "I don't know that anything illegal has happened," I said. "All I have is a phone number on the back of a photograph and the words of some old man. If anyone has any evidence, it's you." "What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know," she said. After a pause she added, "I'll get a divorce, then Mrs. Bly can visit him in prison." I looked at her for several moments, then put my suitcase onto the bed and opened it. "What are you doing?" she said. I'm going back to the hotel, I said. I can work better there. She stared at me. Then, without speaking, she turned and walked from the room. I looked at the manuscript. I wasn't supposed to take it from the house, but I couldn't really work without it. I put it in my suitcase. It was raining outside and I didn't want to walk all the way to Edgerton. But nor did I want to have to ask Ruth to arrange transport. Then I remembered the Ford Escape SUV in the garage. It was still there and the key was in it. I put my suitcase in the car and then got into the driver's seat. As I drove down the forest road, the little map on the satellite navigation screen suddenly came on. In 200 yards, said an American woman's voice, turn right. Then, in 50 yards, turn right. And then, turn right. She was silent for the next few kilometers and I forgot about her. But as I was about to turn right to enter Edgerton, she said, in 200 yards, turn left. Her voice made me jump. In 50 yards turn left. Turn left. She was beginning to annoy me. No, I said and turned right into Main Street. Turn around, she said. I stopped the car and tried to switch the voice off, but the screen changed from the map to a menu of different choices, enter a new destination, return to home address or remember a last destination. I stared at it for a few moments, then chose remember a last destination. Turn around, came the voice again. I sat thinking for a short time. Hadn't Carl been the last driver to put in an address? I couldn't be sure. I turned the Ford around. Once I was out of Edgerton and onto the Vineyard Haven Road, the voice stayed silent for several minutes. I drove on through the rain until the road got narrower under the trees. In 200 yards, turn right, she said. In 50 yards, turn right. Turn right. I turned down the hill into Vineyard Haven and then found myself on the dock, where a queue of cars was driving onto the ferry. Someone knocked on the window next to me. It was the man from the ticket office. You'll have to hurry, he said. The ferry leaves at 8:15 am and the weather's getting bad. There may not be another for some time. After a moment's thought, I got out of the car and bought a ticket. I got a coffee on the ferry and sat in a corner of the bar so I could think. I knew that I should phone Reinhard's house and tell Ruth I'd borrowed the car. But I didn't want to give my reasons for being on the ferry. Also, was I in any danger? If Mkara had put the last address into the satellite navigation, then he hadn't returned from that journey alive. When I drove the car out into the wind and rain of Woods Hole, the satellite screen told me to go north in the direction of Boston. So Mkara hadn't been driving to New York to see Reichardt, I thought. I drove on for over an hour, still following the instructions from the satellite navigation. Finally, the voice told me to turn right onto a very quiet road through some woods. Some minutes later, the voice simply said, "You have reached your destination." Chapter 10. I got out of the car and started to walk along the road. After about 50 meters, I came to a gate and a private road leading to a house half hidden behind some trees. There was a mailbox full of letters next to the gate. Were the owners away? I looked at the names on two of the envelopes. Professor and Mrs. Paul Emmett and Paul and Nancy Emmett. One letter had been readdressed from the Arcadia Institution, with an address in Washington, D.C. Emmett. The name was familiar. I returned to the car and took Mkara's Cambridge envelope from my bag. A few minutes later, I found the photograph of the Footlights members. P. Emmett was one of them and Lang was also in the photograph. After some time a small Japanese car drove past me traveling in the direction of the house. A dark-haired woman was driving and a man sat next to her. He was about 60 years old and he turned to stare at me. I knew at once that he must be Emmett. He got out of the car and took the envelopes from the mailbox, then the car drove through the gate and on towards the house. I waited for a few minutes and then I drove up to the gate. There was an intercom next to the mailbox and I pressed the button. The answer came immediately. "Hello?" It was a woman's voice. "Could I speak to Professor Emmett?" I said. "It's about Adam Lang. I'm helping him with his memoirs." There was a silence and when the next voice came, it was a man's. "This is Paul Emmett. I think you've made a mistake. You were at Cambridge University with Lang," I said. "I've got a picture of the two of you there." There was a long pause. Then the electric gate slowly opened. I drove through and parked next to Emmett's car. I got out, carrying my bag. Emmett was waiting at the open front door of the house. "We just flew in from Washington, so I'm a little tired," he said. "But you've made me curious. Please come in." Once inside, I could hear his wife speaking on the telephone in another room. "Yes," she said. "He's here now." Emmett closed the front door behind us. "Can I see the photograph?" I took it from my bag and gave it to him. "Well," he said, after a moment or two. "I don't remember this at all. But yes, it is me." "How did you get it?" "You must tell me. I'd be happy to," I said. And again I waited. "Yes, well, come into my study," he said after a moment. I followed him into a room with dark green walls and shelves full of books. On the walls were photographs of Emmett pictured with several famous people. I noticed a picture of him with Lang. Emmett sat down behind his desk and I sat in a chair opposite him. "I'm sorry about Lang," he said. "Reichardt was the worst foreign secretary since the 1940s and the ICC is going to make a mess of this situation." "How well do you know him?" I asked. "Lang? Not very well," he said. I pointed to the photograph on the wall. "Oh, that. It was taken at a dinner for the Arcadia Institution, an organization I used to be a member of. But you knew Lang at Cambridge," I said. I took out the other photographs. Now that I looked at them again, I could see Emmett in several. In one, Lang was with some other students and Emmett was standing behind him. "That's you, isn't it?" "Yes, I think it is," he said after a moment. "Can you tell me the names of any of the others?" "The girls, perhaps?" I asked. "No, it's all a long time ago," said. "Where did you get the pictures? Do you know the name Michael Mkara?" I asked. "No," he said, a little too quickly, I thought. "Who is he?" "He was the writer hired to write Lang's memoirs before me," I said. "He drove here to see you nearly 3 weeks ago and died a few hours later." "To see me?" he said. "The satellite navigation in the car he was driving had your address in it," I told him. "But that doesn't prove that he came here," he said. "How did he die?" "He drowned," I said. "Were you here that weekend, 11th and 12th of January?" Emmett sighed, then went to the door. "Nancy!" he called. "Where were we on the 11th and 12th of January?" She was carrying a diary when she came in. "We were in Colorado, at the Aspen Institute," she said. "Oh yes, I was the speaker at the dinner," Emma told me. "I flew back on Sunday. My wife stayed for a few more days. So you could have seen Mkara," I said. "Yes, I could have, but I didn't," he said. "Now, Nancy will take you to the front door. Be sure to turn right at the gate, or the road will take you into the woods and you'll never be seen again." Instead of going back to Martha's Vineyard, I drove into nearby Belmont and found an internet cafe. I got a coffee, sat down in front of a computer, then clicked on a search engine and typed in Paul Emmett and Arcadia Institution. 10 minutes later I knew that the Arcadia Institution had been started in 1991 to encourage democracy and freedom of speech and continually improve the friendship between Britain and America. It had offices in London and in Washington, D.C. Paul Emmett was the institution's first president. He had been born in Chicago in 1949, went to Yale University and St. John's College, Cambridge, and was a lecturer at Harvard University between 1975 and 1979. Nancy Klein was his second wife. Next I typed in Arcadia Institution and Adam Ling and got a report from a newspaper website about a dinner Ling had attended at the Arcadia Institution. Then I went back to the Arcadia website and discovered that one of Arcadia's trustees, Mr. Arthur Prussia, was president of the Hollington Group. I remembered seeing Hollington on the side of Lang's jet. I typed in the name Arthur Prussia and Lang and got a one-year-old newspaper report. London, Arthur Prussia of the Hollington Group is pleased to announce that Adam Lang, ex-Prime Minister of Great Britain, will be joining the company as a consultant. I had never heard of the Hollington Group, but I learned that it had 24 offices around the world, and that two of its most important members had worked for the CIA. And when I typed Arcadia Institution, Hollington Group, CIA, I got a report from another newspaper, Hollington Jet used for CIA torture flights. The Hollington Gulfstream 4 jet aircraft was photographed at the Sterkij military base in Poland on 18 February. It is believed that the CIA have a secret detention center there. This was 2 days after 4 British citizens, Nasser Ashraf, Shakil Qazi, Salim Khan and Farooq Ahmed, were supposedly kidnapped by CIA men from Peshawar, Pakistan. Mr. Ashraf died during questioning. Between February and July of that same year, the jet made 51 visits to Guantanamo and 82 visits to Washington, Dulles International Air Force Base, as well as visiting at Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington, D.C., also U.S. air bases at Ramstein and Rhein-Main in Germany. The plane is also known to have visited Afghanistan, Morocco, Dubai, Jordan, Italy, Japan, Switzerland, Azerbaijan and the Czech Republic. A spokesman for Hollington said that the Gulfstream jet was often hired by other organizations, but he said that he did not know what these organizations used it for. Next I typed CIA and Emmett, and got my biggest shock from a website called Secret Agents in Universities. There was a list of suspected CIA contacts. Among the entries I found, Paul Emmett is reported to have joined the CIA as an officer in either 1969 or 1970. Oh no, I said quietly. That can't be right. I stared at the screen for a full minute before I noticed that 2 short-haired men at another table were looking at me. One was speaking into a mobile phone. Trying to look calm, I pretended to drink the last of my coffee. Then I walked out. The 2 men also left the internet cafe as I hurried to the Ford Escape. When I was inside the vehicle, I locked the doors. I looked down the street but I couldn't see the men. I took out the photographs again and found the footlights picture with Ling and Emmett. Then I looked at the phone number on the back of the photograph. I took out my mobile phone and called Richard Reichart. Chapter 11. He answered within a few seconds. "Hello," he said quietly. "I tried to call you back a couple of times." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry. It didn't seem right to talk to you. I'm working for Adam Lang. Don't tell me your name," he said quickly. "Don't use any names." "Where did you find my telephone number?" "On the back of a photograph," I said. "The person who was doing my job before me had it." "Did he?" said Reichart, sounding shocked. "I've been to see one of the people in the photograph. Perhaps you can help me. Where are you now?" he asked. "In New England," I replied. "You know which city I'm in, don't you?" he said. "Yes. Get the first plane that you can. Flying is safer than driving," he told me. "I'll get someone to meet you when you arrive." It was late afternoon when I parked the car at Boston's Logan Airport. My telephone rang. It was Ruth. "What do you think you're doing?" she said, angrily. "You're not at your hotel." "I decided to go to New York," I said, "to see John Maddox about the book, now that things have changed. I was worried about you." "Adam's still in Washington, as far as I know," she said. "He keeps calling me, but I don't answer the phone." "When will you be back?" "I'm not sure," I said. "Maybe tonight." She didn't say goodbye. New York's LaGuardia airport was busy. I couldn't see Reichart or anyone that I recognized. But then I was shocked to see a man holding a piece of paper with the name Michael Mkara on it. He was in his 50s and was tall with dark hair. I followed him to his car. We drove out of the airport and, within minutes, stopped outside a big hotel near Grand Central Parkway. "If you need to call, use this," he said, giving me a new mobile phone. "Turn your old phone off and pay for your hotel room with cash. You're staying one night." He gave me a small piece of paper. "This is the name you should use and the telephone number you can call us on. Give the hotel an address in England, but not your own. Don't use the internet and don't speak to anyone you don't know, especially any attractive women who show interest in you." "You sound like my mother," I said. Once I was inside the hotel, I checked the name on the piece of paper, Clive Dixon. "You have a room for me," I said to the hotel clerk. "My name's Dixon." My room was on the 6th floor, with a view across Grand Central Parkway to LaGuardia and the East River. 20 minutes later, my new mobile phone rang. "It's me," said Reichart when I answered it. "Are you alone?" "Yes," I answered. "Open the door," he said. He was waiting in the corridor outside my room with my driver from LaGuardia. "Okay, Frank," he said to the other man. "Go and wait in the lobby." Frank went away and Reichardt walked into my room. "So, how long have you been working for Lang?" he asked. "Since Monday," I replied. "Then you probably know him as well as anyone," he said and laughed. "I worked with him for 15 years, but never really knew him." Mkara didn't either. "Let's sit down." There were two small, comfortable chairs and Reichardt sat opposite me. "You know who I am," said Reichardt. "So who are you?" "I'm a ghostwriter," I said. "I was hired to rewrite Adam Lang's memoirs after Mkara died. You mentioned a photograph." "Can I see it?" he asked. When he saw the envelope, he got quite excited. Then I showed him the photograph. "Is that it?" he said. He looked disappointed. "Why is your telephone number on the back?" I asked. He looked at me for several moments before saying, "Why should I help you? Why should I help you?" I answered. We stared at each other. Then he smiled. "You should have been a politician," he said. He started walking up and down in front of the bed. "Everything done in this war on terror is illegal under international law. Iraq, torture, Guantanamo," he said. "But proving it needs evidence and I've been looking for that evidence for years." Suddenly, just before Christmas, it came through the post. No letter with it, just a top-secret memorandum from the Prime Minister to the Secretary of State for Defense. It was a clear order from the Prime Minister to the Special Armed Forces to kidnap those 4 men in Pakistan and give them to the CIA. "A war crime," I said. "A war crime," he agreed. So I took it to the ICC. "Who sent it to you?" I asked. At first, I didn't know. Then Mkara phoned me. "Hello, Richard," he said. "Did you get the present that I sent you?" I quickly stopped him talking because the phone was bugged. I work at the United Nations and all their phones are bugged. I gave him a new telephone number that I had not used before and told him to phone me again. "And what did he tell you?" I asked. "He said that he'd been doing research in Cambridge for Adam's memoirs," said Reichardt. He'd found the memorandum about Operation Tempest, but also something much more important. Something that explained everything that went wrong while Lang was Prime Minister. "What was it?" I asked, suddenly excited. "He wouldn't tell me on the phone," said Reichardt. "He wanted to meet me. But he did say that the answer could be found in Lang's autobiography, if anyone checked carefully." He said that it was all there in the beginning. He sounded very depressed. He told me that he'd call me in a day or two to arrange a meeting, but about a week later I heard that he was dead. He was depressed because he'd just discovered that one of the men in that photograph was an officer in the CIA, I said. What? Said Reichardt. His name is Paul Emmett, I said. He was a professor at Harvard and then he became the president of something called the Arcadia Institution. Have you heard of it? Yes, he said. And I've always thought the CIA were involved with it. But would someone join the CIA and then immediately be sent to do research at a university in England? I asked. It's very possible, he replied. It's a good place to look for future politicians, or even prime ministers. Show me the photograph again. Which one is Emmett? I pointed to Emmett and said, I got the information from an internet website, so it may or may not be true. Apparently he joined the CIA after he left Yale University. That's about 3 years earlier than this photograph. Could it be true? Oh yes, I can believe it, said Reichardt. What's suspicious is that he knew Lang. No. What's really suspicious is that only hours after Mkara found Emmett at his house near Boston, Mkara was found dead on a beach in Martha's Vineyard, I said. After that I told him everything I discovered and how I discovered it. And the more I talked, the more excited Reichardt became. Maybe it was Emmett who suggested to Lang that he should make a career of politics, he said. What year did Lang join the party? 1975, I told him. 1975. He said, excitedly. Do you remember Sir Reginald Giffen? I think so, I answered. He's dead now, said Reichardt. But he was an MP who was always making speeches supporting the Americans. When he suddenly retired, everyone was surprised, except a young party member who had moved into Giffen's constituency 6 months earlier. And became the party's candidate and won one of the safest parliamentary seats in the country when he was only 30, Adam Lang, I said. Are you really saying that the CIA asked Giffen to retire to help Lang get into Parliament? Listen, he said. I was already in Parliament and I watched just how fast Lang became party leader. Of course he had help. Tell me one thing he did as Prime Minister that Washington and the US government wouldn't have approved of. Quite the opposite, he did everything to support them, even when it made enemies for us in other parts of the world. And more than that, he sacked any minister who didn't agree with his support of the United States. People like me. He paused, then went on. But all this is understandable if he was working for the CIA. The question is, what are we going to do about it? We don't have any proof, I said. We can't be sure that Emmett was in the CIA, or that he persuaded Ling to join. You'll just have to get some proof, Reichert told me. Ling lets you ask him questions, right? Okay, we'll write some questions to get him to say something that makes him look guilty. Then you'll have it all on the recordings. But the recordings belong to him, not me, I told him. The War Crimes Court can legally ask for them, he said. I didn't like this. I didn't want to become involved in a war crimes trial. Maybe I won't make any recordings, I said. Maybe I'll say I didn't know anything about all this. Then I'll give the court a recording of this conversation. He opened his jacket to show me a small microphone on the front of his shirt, with a wire going into the inside pocket of his jacket. Frank is recording every word down in the lobby, he said. Oh, don't look so shocked. Did you think that I'd come to a meeting with a stranger without recording everything that was said? A stranger who's working for Lang? He smiled. But you aren't working for Lang anymore, you're working for me,